Today I'm speaking with Sara Martin. Sara, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and Sara is to me, a fellow YouTuber, a writer, a blogger, an Instagrammer. She's in Ohio, and I don't know too much more about Sara than that. So, Sara, could you tell us anything else about yourself, of what you're doing these days, and what you're up to?
Sure. I actually just put out my first solo piano CD. That's something
Nice.
I've been working on. So I enjoy playing piano and writing music, besides writing and all of that. In my day-to-day life, I am a cat mom, which I never expected to happen, but I have 4 cats that keep me pretty busy, my wife, and I work as an administrative assistant.
Nice. What are your cats' names?
We have Boots, Kit Kat, Primrose, and PETA. Kind of a
Nice.
weird combination, but
Nice. I'm curious, would you ever consider getting one of those cats that don't have the fur? I think, is it this, not Siamese, but have you seen those ones where they don't have any fur on them?
yeah.
Would you ever have you ever looked at one of those or one of the stranger cats?
I mean, not in person. I don't know if I'd personally
Yeah.
get one, but
The
who
one
knows?
kind of cat I've always wanted is one of those. I think it's called an ocelot, where it looks like a little tiger or leopard. Have you seen those?
Yeah,
I'm sure they're $1,000, but they're pretty cool
probably.
looking. Well, Sara has a YouTube channel, and the link will be right beneath this video. But please go subscribe and like her videos and watch them. Sara does an amazing job at talking through her story, and she touches on a bunch of topics that are very, very relevant to what a lot of others of us are thinking through. You do a fantastic job at it, and I really do encourage people to go watch your videos. Before we get into the meat of your story, I wanted to ask, what is your favorite, like if you're going to Starbucks, what's your favorite kind of coffee or drink to order?
I actually don't drink coffee, which is
Really?
really weird. Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna have to end the interview now. Just kidding.
Yeah, I
Tea?
don't. I don't drink it.
Tea?
Only if I'm like feeling under the weather.
Okay. So what if you were to pick your favorite drink of any kind of drink, what would you drink?
I probably shouldn't be, but I'm a pop drinker. Like
Okay,
I I love Pepsi.
gotcha.
So,
I wasn't a coffee drinker before my wife actually got me addicted to it. We were driving back cross country from our wedding in Montana back to Atlanta, Georgia, and I had never liked coffee. My dad had drunk it, growing up, and I'd never liked it. I could kind of stomach coffee flavored ice cream, but
yeah.
and she was, as these road pit stops on the way back from Montana, we're stopping for coffee, driving, and I'm like, oh, I'll just try one. I was like, that's really good. It was like, like a latte, not black coffee, but just a latte. And it was like, oh, I was addicted within a few days. But
Yeah. The only kind I will drink is Tim Hortons French vanilla. That
I
is the only kind I like. Probably because it's like 90% sugar.
exactly. Well, I know you go through some of this in your videos, and I again encourage people to go watch for the details you put there. But could you give us some, your background? Where are you coming from in terms of Christianity? What was it like growing up? Was your family Christian, or your siblings and all that? Just where are you coming from with all the faith topics?
Yeah. So growing up, my parents really weren't religious, but my grandparents on my mom's side definitely were. So I ended up going to church with them most weekends. They would take me with them. My grandma was my Sunday school teacher, so I mostly just went to Sunday school with her class. Um, so that was really my primary influence when it came to religion. They were very serious about their faith. They were part of a smaller denomination called the Missionary Church, which was big on world missions, as the name kind of implies. But my grandparents really took their faith like super seriously. It influenced everything. They were always talking with me and my younger sister just about how important God was and just instilling those values in us. And just the way that I am, I take things very seriously. So I believed all of it. My faith became the most important aspect of my life, and I got to share that with my grandparents. We would always talk about things. My grandparents would teach me about the Bible, and we
Hmm.
watched different Christian programs on TV when I was at their house. So yeah, that was really my background, was just growing up going to church with them.
Did you
My
ever
old
talk with your parents and like ask where they were with God and all that?
A little bit more as I was older. My mom, I think I was more interested in like why my mom wasn't like continuing to go to church because she used to go with my grandparents to church. For her, she just felt like it was kind of something she was forced to do growing
Mm,
up. And so as an adult, she just kind of backed away from all of it. And I
mm.
think she still believed, but it just wasn't something she wanted to keep pursuing, I guess.
Yeah. Do you know, did any any of them ever kind of have a conversation with you about the gospel, even one where you initiated it, where you kind of said, hey, can we make sure that you're gonna be in heaven someday?
Yeah, my grandpa was pretty vocal about like sharing the gospel with me, and um, I knew the story pretty well of how Jesus died for me, and I needed to believe in him and accept him into my heart in order to go to heaven. But more than that, it wasn't just about getting to heaven, it was about living a life that was fulfilling and that had purpose with God at the center and doing his will and fulfilling his plans for my life and all of that. But it wasn't until I was 13 that I like really understood it, not just knowledge wise, but also like at a heart level, where I made the decision to really want to follow Jesus.
Mm.
And um, it was actually because I saw the musical Jesus Christ Superstar with my family. I don't know. It was just like seeing a reenactment sort of Jesus on the cross. It just got to me. Like, oh my gosh, someone actually was hanging on a cross for me and died for me. And so that was when I actually decided, like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to follow and believe in.
Mm.
And it kind of changed a lot for me. Like, I was in middle school at that point. So I really got into more of like Bible study and asking my grandparents questions. Like, I became really curious
Mm.
about things, and I found that like I didn't feel like I fit in much anymore at school. Just I I feel like I've always been more like mature about things than people my age, at least growing up. Like kids aren't really like worried at 13, I don't think, about like making these big decisions about following God and wanting to please him and
Yeah.
being all concerned about that. So I just felt like I didn't fit in much. Like I wanted to do certain things with my life and make choices that would honor God. And I just felt like everyone around me was just super immature, and I don't know, just didn't feel like I fit in anymore.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. I think some of the songs even that we would sing in youth group. Remember one? It was I don't want to be a casual Christian. Did you ever sing that one?
Mm-mm.
It's I don't want to be a casual Christian. Something that I want to light up the night with an everlasting light. Something like that. And it just I forget, which is a good thing. Some of the words, but it's like the idea. I don't want to be on the fence. I want to I want to be on fire for Christ. I want to be really, really intense and intentional. And it's when you're in it, it's it feels very fulfilling. It feels like it's like this is what life's about, and I'm it's kind of escaping from the rabbit. What's the word? Just the rat race of life. As a young person, it's about being cool or dating or whatever. And as a young adult, it's about getting a good job and a good education. And it's like, no, I'm escaping to the real stuff. The real stuff is what's eternal, and that's Jesus. And it's very it's once you get a taste of it, the maturity that you feel like you're exhibiting and the passion that's, especially if you have at least a couple people around you saying yes, yes, let's do this thing for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks you in really tight.
Yeah,
Mm.
I totally agree.
So could I ask, before you tell me what happened next, when you were in that phase, do you recall kind of like your personal relationship with Christ? Was it do you recall if it felt real, like you were really praying and talking to him? And like I know a lot of people talk about how it feels like it was a love relationship. It was real. It wasn't like it was a pretend thing. It was it was when you were people would journal, they would journal and they would sense like Jesus is reading these thoughts in my head
Mm-hmm.
when I'm praying. Was it like that for you, or how did it feel?
Yeah, it definitely felt like a real relationship. I mean, I had times where it felt like God wasn't there, wasn't listening, but I knew in my mind that, yeah, God is there. He hears me whether I feel him or not. I did start journaling a lot. I would write journal entries to him and just express whatever I was going through at that time and write things that I was learning in the Bible and different books I was reading about like being a young person for God and all of that stuff. So it definitely felt real. Um, yeah, it was it was again just a really important part of my life and shaped a lot of who I saw myself to be. I always kind of struggled with like low self-esteem, and so for me, like to know that God loved me and made me with certain talents and skills, like that was all stuff that I took to heart and really shaped
Hmm.
like who I would end up becoming.
And on that note, you do a really good job in your videos talking about how this Christianity, it wraps up in your identity. It becomes part of who you are. Could you speak a little bit to that and then what that kind of meant to you at that point in your life?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, I mean, you have people constantly asking you, what is it you want to do with your life? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish and what jobs are you looking at? And so for me, like my faith was definitely a huge part of that, especially with my grandparents being part of that missionary church. My grandpa was always mentioning to me growing up, like, well, maybe God will want you to be a missionary to a different country. And that terrified me. Like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, I don't want to leave my family and like go to some place I've never been before. So that was always like a huge fear of mine. But I figured if I was so afraid of it, then that probably was what God wanted me to do. Like whatever you're most afraid of, that's what God wants you to do. The more
Hmm.
uncomfortable you feel, that's a good sign. Like you're on the right track. So I knew like as I was in middle school and going into high school and starting to kind of figure out like what my next step would be after I graduated that I didn't want to live just like an average life. Like
Hmm.
that was something that was really drilled into me was you need to be, really intense about your faith, like you had mentioned, and you need to be making choices about what you're going to do to make an impact for the kingdom of God and reaching people and telling them the good news about Jesus. And so that was actually a reason why I chose to study psychology. So I wanted to help people. But even before that, it played a huge role in picking where I wanted to go to college. I knew I was going to go to a Christian college. So all the other colleges that were not Christian by default were off the table.
Hmm.
Um, there were two that I looked at, and there was one that would have been fine, but I deliberately didn't pick that one because it didn't feel like Christianity was important enough. Like they had chapel once a week, but you didn't have to go. This other college that I looked at had chapel twice a week and it was mandatory. Like, oh yeah, I want that one where everyone has to be there and
Hmm.
the community just felt so much stronger there. Like everyone was really serious about their faith, like I was. And that was huge in continuing my faith journey and becoming more and more, involved
Hmm.
in Jesus stuff and all of that.
Which college did you end up going to?
I went to Spring Arbor University in
Okay,
Michigan. Yeah.
very cool. The one I went to is called Lancaster Bible College in central Pennsylvania. Very, very similar. I went to actually a different school for my freshman year. Have you ever heard of Bob Jones University?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's if you know about it. I'm ashamed, but after my freshman year, I went to Lancaster Bible College and finished up there.
Gotcha.
I was curious, it's a small step backwards, but you mentioned at 13 you got really serious about the Lord. And I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of people, around that age, between 10 and 15, somewhere, depending on, maturity levels, they do get, and also if your church really is inviting you towards this, in the sermons or the youth group, but the idea of rededicating your life to Christ, and a lot of it comes down to, really saying, is this your parents' faith, or in your case, your grandparents' faith, or is it your faith? Is it real? And it's not just the idea of being, are you willing to live for Christ versus the world? It's really a question of are you are you really even saved? Because if you're really saved, you're going to live for Christ. You're going to be on fire for the Lord. If you're living for the world and yourself and your selfishness, then it's like a question of, are you really saved? Because if you have the fruit of the Spirit, you're gonna be doing these things. And so it's not just a question of being serious about Christ. It's about the gospel. And so I wanted to ask to kind of set a baseline for anyone that would question, what was it that you were basically bowing your knee to, pledging your allegiance to. What is the gospel? What does it mean to to come to Christ the way the Bible says?
The way that I understood it, I'm not a theologian or anything, but basically everyone has sin in their lives. We're not perfect. We all have things that we struggle with, and for that reason, we can't be before God. Like we don't measure up to the standard that He has for us. And so He made a way for us to be made right with Him, which is painful to even like repeat. There's all this old language that that I used to use all the time. But God made a way for us to be made right with Him through Jesus, His Son, who is perfect, lived a perfect life. And by believing in Him, His righteousness becomes our own. And God sees that instead of our sinfulness and imperfection, forgives all of our sins, and we can be in relationship with Him, not just, in the life to come, but in the here and now. And that also offers us just like fulfilling life and being able to do life every day with God and have an intimate relationship with Him, which I hate that phrase because it means something totally different depending on who you're asking. But having like a very like close relationship with Him where He literally like not speaks with you. Maybe to some people they feel like He's actually speaking with them, but just where He guides your every step and He's part of everything, all of your thoughts and just the details of your life. And I loved that aspect of it, knowing that even in moments when I felt totally alone, like God was there with me. He knew what I was thinking. He knew my desires and my hopes and my wants and my struggles and all of that. So it wasn't just about like eternal life and where am I going after I died. It was also about like having this person who knew everything about me and was always going to be like my closest companion and had great things in store for my life. Maybe not like from a normal standard of like, oh, I'm going to get this great job and make lots of money, but just again, having that close companion and I don't know, just guiding you into the things that would fulfill you.
Yeah, it was a great description of the gospel. I don't think I could have done a better job than that. That was perfect. And it's good to hear. Sometimes I hear people ask that question, and some people will give more of a generic answer, like, well, it just means believe in Jesus and kind of live a good life. And you nailed it, though. We're talking about the judicial righteousness of Christ being, or the righteousness of Christ being judicially applied to us, the atonement, the propitiation that He gives us, that it's not our works, it's His grace, his righteousness on us through His grace and His kindness alone. And, that by His, death and resurrection, we identify with Him and we get to be partakers of what He did. And I did want to ask on a note of just, it being so real to you, do you ever recall anything that occurred at any point in your Christian life where not necessarily you'd call it a miracle, but just a sense of like, I saw God work? Because I had that come up. I asked, I've got this friend I grew up with, a really lovely lady that we were friends all through church, and we're still friends, I hope, in some level. But she's a very strong believer, very, very emotional about her relationship with Christ. It's a love, it's a deep love relationship. Mm-hmm. And I share with her some of these things that I'm learning about, where Christianity came from and where the Bible came from. And her answer basically was like, you know what, Tim, I don't really care. I have seen the power of God in my life.
Hmm.
And, just, I don't know if she'd call it miracles or just, answered prayers, but she has seen it. It's too real to not be real. And I was
Yeah.
just curious, did you ever have any sense of just whether it was more of the quasi peace or an actual like doors open that, really otherwise shouldn't have been opened, that kind of confirmed your faith at that point?
Yeah, I've definitely had experiences like that, which is ultimately what kind of led to it all unraveling, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But for me, I mean, it wasn't anything like super miraculous, but just like more everyday things, I guess. Like in high school, I was super, super shy, like painfully shy. I had gone for months and people would still come up and ask me, "Oh, is this your first time here?" Like, no, it's not. But anyway, for whatever reason, I decided to go on this mission trip with my youth group to New York City. And for me, that was like crazy. Like for little shy me to decide to go with a huge group of people, I had no idea who they were. Like my family was shocked that I wanted to do this.
Hmm.
But again, I was super serious about Jesus. I always wanted to secretly go to New York City, so that was also a plus. But it was a huge deal, and the fact that I did it, I went, and it was amazing, and all of that, like it, it was to me, it was like a God thing. Like he wanted me to go on that trip, and I did it, and there was
Hmm.
a lot of good that came out of it. So it was more like stuff like that, just things I didn't think I could do on my own, but it seemed like God had orchestrated all of the events for it to happen and gave me the courage and strength to do it.
Hmm.
So it was more stuff like that. Um, Another example was in college. I had never dated anyone before college, and my sophomore year, I wasn't like trying to find somebody to date. I was hoping that I would at some point, but it was just like this guy came out of nowhere, seemed perfect, was just as serious about Jesus as I was, and we had so many things in common. Like it was just eerie
Hmm.
how many things we had in common. Like I I don't have many favorite artists, but this obscure artist that I love, like his mom took art classes with him. And
Hmm.
it's like, okay, there's just too many signs that seem to be from God. Like this is the person that God wants me to be with. So just like that and having other people confirm that too. Like, wow, you guys, like this totally seems like God set this whole thing up.
Hmm.
And it's hard not to believe it too when you have other people on the outside telling you, like, yeah, I totally see Jesus in this.
Hmm.
And it was the same thing with like the mission trip. That was something my youth pastor kept mentioning, like even a few years afterwards. Like the fact that Sarah went on that mission trip, like, wow, that was just totally a God thing. So, I mean,
Okay.
those are just a
I haven't
couple
heard
of
that expression in a
examples.
while.
Yeah,
That brings back some memories.
that's a God thing. And I had a friend in youth group, she was an adult leader that kind of sounds similar to the friend you were describing, where it's more like a love relationship with God. And she is totally that way. She still is. But I it had an influence on me where I would see Jesus in the same way she did. And she would encourage me to like look for God signs or like to write down any God moments that I had, and we could share them at group the next week or something. And so for me, like, I don't remember how exactly it started, but for me, like, my thing, we're seeing clouds that were shaped like hearts. Like, to me, when I saw a cloud that looked like a heart, I knew that was just like God winking at me or something. Like, it sounds so ridiculous, but that was real to me.
I see that sometimes, like people see a double rainbow or something. They're like,
Yeah.
God's definitely telling me it's going to be okay or something. And it's weird.
Right.
It's almost like how people would kind of make fun of tarot cards or maybe not tarot cards, but horoscopes. They'd say that's
Mhm.
so generic. You could apply that to anybody.
Right.
And it almost seems like, you know what? A double rainbow could tell anybody that God's looking down on them and making them know that He's watching them and loving them. And it's like, no, but it's specifically for me. And it's really funny. And it's like, well, what if to get to that rainbow, you needed a really bad rainstorm, and that rainstorm ruined someone else's day?
Right.
Like, what was God doing to them?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it aside, but it's just funny to me how it works.
Right.
It's funny too, you mentioned, I haven't talked about this too much or thought about it even too much, but the idea of the open doors, the peace, I always was confused because like you'd sometimes see these stories of, either in the Bible or heroes of the faith throughout the ages, where it was like, God put a burden on their heart and they went through so many hardships to do what God called them to. So it was like, a door slammed in your face, but God helped me push through it, and another door, and I pushed through it for God, because God was giving me the grace and the strength. And it was like this idea of like persevere through the hard stuff and the closed doors. And then other times you'd hear it like, if God wants this to work, he'll open the doors. Like, and I was like, well, which one is it? Is it if he opens the doors and it's clearly, if it's clearly a perfect fit, is that God's will? Or if it's not a fit and I'm supposed to break through it with his strength and power, is that what's supposed to be the fit? And I always felt confused. And I honestly, I don't know if you want to, talk about if this was part of your experience too, but I felt like the longer that I went as a Christian, the more the idea of the sense of God's leading, his guidance, and the peace of yes, I want you to buy the red car, not the blue car, or I want you to, date this person, not that person. I want you to be at this church, not that church. Just all those things, it got really not just like confusing, but almost weird. I was like, this doesn't add up anymore. Like there's no peace. And there were things I'd have total peace. I'd be like, oh, this feels like, someone injected some kind of peace medicine right in my brain. It's like, I feel it. I feel God's presence. I know this is it. God wants me to do this. I am 110% sure. And it would crumble in my hands. And I was like, what was that about?
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was always a reason to explain like why it didn't work out. Oh, well, God just works in mysterious ways. Like just all of that stuff, trying to explain it away. Like I do not miss that at all. Like it just made everything so complicated. Things that didn't need to be complicated.
I love how you, in your one video, you use the expression, I think, if I remember correctly, you said it just wore you out. And that's a great way to put it. It just wears you out, wears you down, it wears you thin. And you're like, it's hard to have cognitive dissonance and all. You're like spinning all these plates and you're trying to hold them up and juggling them. It's like it doesn't work, and it's really hard to admit that. But while you're in it and saying no, this does work. I'll make it work. If it doesn't work, I'll make it work. It's hard work to do that, and it's the whole idea of my burden is easy, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's not at all.
No, it's really not. And ultimately it was the cognitive dissonance that did me in. I mentioned that relationship in college, the guy that I was dating. Eventually it just like, without getting into a ton of details, I think I have a video on my channel that goes into it more, but it just wasn't working out. Like I felt like we had all of these signs that had indicated to me that this was God's choice of person for me. Like I was supposed to be with him. But like it got long distance and I was stressed out and just missed seeing him. And like mentally I was not doing okay for other reasons besides just the relationship. But like there's some level of spiritual manipulation in the relationship, just with him saying like, you just need to keep waiting on God to work things out. Like, he'll come through and we just need to keep waiting and keep trusting him. And for a long time I could get by with that and tell myself that, but at a point I just couldn't do it anymore. Like there's just things going on with the relationship that I couldn't take it anymore. So like, God, if this is who you want me to be with, like I can't. So I felt like I had to prioritize my own mental well-being over what I thought was God's plan for me. But I did. I picked my mental well-being, and that was a pretty big blow to how I thought God worked and how I thought faith worked. And yeah, it was a big deal. I was just very confused, like to have all of these signs indicating what I thought was like, yeah, this is what God wants for me. And for it to just fall apart, it was kind of devastating.
It is. Yeah, I very very similar experience. It is. It's and kudos to you, bravo to you for taking that choice. And there's a bunch of little choices like that I talk with people about. When I interview them, and some of the choices, they're so hard. Like I was just speaking with someone last night, late last night actually. He's in Australia, so it was his Sunday morning and my Saturday late night. But talking about how it's like when you put yourself up as God's as the judge, so to speak, of like, you know what, I'm not comfortable anymore with this genocide stuff in Joshua and in the Old Testament. I'm not comfortable with slavery. I'm not comfortable with being able to take the young girls that are virgins as captives. I'm not comfortable with that. And it's like you're setting yourself up as judge at that point. You're saying I'm judging the Bible. And in a sense, if God is real at that point, he was to us. If he's real, then I'm judging God effectively. And that just even to think about saying those words in your head, it's like that takes guts. And for a lot of people, it's like, you don't do it. He's the king. He will call the shots and you bow your knee to him. And it's like just to whisper to like, I think I'm judging God. I think I'm judging the Bible. It's like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. Or whether or not I can, I'm doing it. Like I'm taking the authority and the power. I'm judging God. I'm judging this book. And it's hard. It's so hard. And some people, I'm sure it's the blasphemy that's implied in that is so difficult to even consider, even theoretically. And it's like, but once you do it, you're like, you know what? This is absolutely healthy. This is so healthy to be a judge of this book. But anyway, I didn't want to cut you off too from your story. What happened next? It sounds like we got you up to the point where you're serious about the Lord, but you were questioning things with the relationship and the peace of God of his opening that door, not with that relationship. What happened next in your journey?
Well, before all of that, I spent 4 years in college, in a Christian college, just living the Jesus life. Like, it was
Good
great.
experience?
Yeah, definitely a great experience. I had great relationships, made great friends. I'm still friends with today. Just to mention that, like, I definitely became even stronger of a Christian from going to college where I did. So then again, after college ends, the relationship ends. After that, I was just really sad and confused. Right around the time that I had ended that relationship, I was a new graduate. I was looking for jobs. I had found one that I thought would be a really good fit for me, working at like a mental hospital. Since I have a degree in psychology, I thought this is great. This is perfect. And again, I thought there had been all of these signs that this is the job that God wanted me to be in. Like, I thought he was just kind of handing me this job. Like, yeah, this is what I want for you. And he opened all these doors. And anyway, I showed up for my first day of work there, and it just, like, every fiber of my being was like, this is a horrible job fit for you. Like, you can't work here. It just, like, it was 12-hour shifts, and it just, I don't know. It just did not mesh with me. And I remember, like, over the course of those 12 hours, just having more and more of this feeling of like, oh, I can't do this. I just remember thinking, like, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, I thought this is the job you wanted me to be in. Like, I had showed up late for an interview at one point and was mortified. Like, I just threw this out the window. Like, they're not going to hire me, but they still gave it to me. Anyway, I just was so confused. And I know with first jobs, like, it's going to be scary. And there's going to be some degree of fear and all of that and anxiety. But this just did not feel right. The job I had after that, like, yeah, there was still fear, but it wasn't like this, conflict of this doesn't feel right. Anyway,
So it's like a repeat of is this God's will or is it not?
Right.
Again.
Yeah. So I ended up quitting. I didn't go back. And again, with the relationship ending and now with this job, I was just really confused. Like, I thought I knew how God worked. Like, I thought I understood him, but I guess I don't. Like it was just very confusing. And so
Mm.
ended up like becoming pretty depressed, um, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, not sure of who God was, and then not sure of who I was because my entire identity was wrapped up in my faith.
Mm.
So it was really hard to be questioning all of these things and on top of it not know who I was anymore, why I was here, just asking some really intense questions.
Did you feel like you had anyone that you could kind of walk through that with in family or friends that would not judge you for asking those hard questions?
I could share about um like just how I was feeling depressed in general. I could share, like how the relationship had ended and that was a bummer, and the job not working out. Like those are all things that most people would get. Like yeah, that would be disheartening and discouraging, but um the questions I was asking about my faith, I don't even know that I was really like allowing myself to get into them too deeply because there's just guilt and not wanting to be a heretic
Mm.
and thinking of the Bible verses that talk about like if if you don't believe or you stop believing, like how can you be brought back to the faith? Like that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So that was scary. Like it
Yeah.
felt like you could ask questions within certain boundaries, but once you got close to the edge or over the edge, like I don't know if there's any coming back from that. So
Hmm. Could I
so
go
yeah,
Could I ask where did the Cambodia story come in? At what point in the timeline was that trip?
that was my junior year of college.
Okay.
So I wasn't asking the questioning my faith sort of questions yet entirely, but that did play a role. My junior year of college, we went on a cross cultural trip for 3 weeks. That was a graduation requirement of everyone who went to Spring Arbor,
Mm.
which was great. I love that that was built in, where you had to get out of your own culture and experience more of the world, which kind of backfired on the whole like idea of the university of like go out into the world and be lights for Jesus. Like, well, I did that and now I'm kind of questioning everything. But yeah, going there was really eye opening. I would definitely encourage anyone that has the opportunity to go visit another country to do so, just to get out of your own bubble. And just like the world is such a bigger place than it seems in America, or in your own community, wherever you are. And so just to see like people living so differently and trying to like take the Christianity I knew and apply it to people who live totally different and places that are totally different. Like it was a totally new thing for me. And yeah, it was just very interesting.
Is it? I assume a Buddhist country.
Hmm.
Did it at the time, or sort of after you left, as you're reflecting on the trip, did it hit you at all that these people are all destined for eternal punishment, and no matter how good their life is in their Buddhism, that pretty much unless you allow for a theology that allows at least babies that die to go to heaven, but once they reach the age of accountability, that pretty much if they don't escape their Buddhism and turn to Christ, that they're pretty much headed to eternal flames. Was that on your mind at all, and did that cause any dissonance for you?
I'm sure I thought about it at some point, but I really didn't think about it a whole lot. And
Hmm.
that's just paralyzing to think about, like, and feel powerless. Like there's nothing I can do. I can't save, millions and millions of people. So I guess I focused more on just like the Christian groups that we had visited and talked with. And that was kind of neat to just see how they kind of had their own like version of Christianity that they were making their own. There's definitely like evangelical aspects of it, but just how they were trying to spread the gospel in a way that made sense to the people in Cambodia. It didn't look exactly like it would in America and doesn't have to. And that was something that I kind of learned while I was there. Like, and that also made me question, like, well, who's to say that the version we have in America, like Western civilization, all that, who's to say that's the right version? Like,
Yeah.
what makes my version of Christianity better than how it's practiced in other places in the world?
Yeah. That kind of dynamic continually amazes me. And it's especially hit home as I've been studying recently about the different books, such as, apocryphal books that people have in their Bibles, and to learn that, the Ethiopian church, as far as I understand, they've never lost certain books. Like some churches, like wrangled over them, and they kind of put them, into like a side, like this isn't inspired, but this is, helpful books to read. Um, maybe books written by Christians, but not inspired by God. But to learn that the Ethiopian church, which is, I believe today, millions and millions and millions of Christians, that they never lost the book of Enoch. So these people are going to a book that for daily inspiration. And I've joined some of the different discussion groups where people, Christians discuss the book of Enoch. And they get so much inspiration and joy and delight, and they're, they do their devotion, so to speak, on this book of Enoch. And it's like, I never even heard about it till I was in my mid-20s, and never studied it till I was in my early 40s. And it's like this, like all these versions of Christianity, but even inspired books that are so different. And obviously the Catholic Church I knew had some different stuff, but to learn even that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had Enoch and never lost it. And I know I was never told that. I'd be more okay with some of the things being different if they were put on the table, like, hey, people believe different things, but it was always like this is the true stuff, and there's some other weird stuff, but you can look it up if you want to, but it's weird. But we've got the real stuff, and that's good enough. And the more you learn about other Christians and about other religions, it's really a hard pill to swallow to say we're right on everything. I mean, it's an arrogance issue, really. It comes down to a lot of arrogance.
Yeah.
Mm.
I did want to mention too about your question of like whether I was thinking about, the people that were Buddhist in Cambodia, like while I was there thinking about them going to hell. I guess another reason why I didn't focus on that a whole lot is because while we were there, we learned a lot about the genocide that took place in Cambodia during the 1970s.
Mm.
And it was hard, I think, to even think about like all of the victims of that, like where they were in eternity, like just knowing like how, like what they went through and
Yeah.
what the country went through. It's like, wasn't that hell enough? Like, because is God really going to send all of these people to hell just because they didn't believe something when yet they were tortured and families were separated and just all of this awful stuff? And there's all the questions along with that, like how could God allow this and all of those overwhelming questions, but just also like to see suffering like that. Like I've seen suffering in America obviously, but nothing to that degree. Like I've never seen a human skull in real life before. Like in Cambodia, I'm looking at this huge monument and there's just hundreds of them. And to me, I'm looking at each one like that was a person. That was a person. And I believe that God has like a specific plan for my life. But what about that person and that person and that person? Just looking at all of these skulls that represented a unique individual that God was supposed to have a plan for their life. Like it didn't make sense to me. Like, I don't know. It was really eye-opening, I guess.
Yeah, it shakes you up. And I think it's a great point about this, about the torture, like, just imagining a story, maybe a lady stands there while she has to watch her husband get killed, then her babies get killed, and lastly she gets slaughtered. And
Yeah.
to think that the very next moment, yeah, she's praying to Buddha or whoever to please, please, please stop this slaughter. The very next moment, as soon as she's dead, she's burning in hell after having just gone through that. That's what this amounts to, because she did not bow her knee to Christ. maybe didn't even know about Christ, but she certainly did not have a relationship with him. And it's interesting to me in my journey. A lot of that cognitive dissonance, I found a way to just not avoid it, just I guess just put it aside, to let it not be an issue. It was like, I think the big thing that got me was this idea of God's wisdom is so much higher than ours. And so it was this sense of, you're going to have questions, you're going to have struggles, you're going to have things that just don't make sense. But number one, if God is king, who are we to judge? He's in charge. His wisdom is certainly much higher than ours. And the idea that there's answers are coming. Answers are coming, and when we see the answer, it'll be more like a very, very cathartic. Oh, God was doing something amazing. Oh, it's like, but I mean, you take that to its logical extreme. You think about individuals like you talking about. That was a human's life. That was a skull. That was someone's life. Like, and I'm thinking now, like, okay, so as this person was being abused and raped, oh, God was doing something. Oh, as this Catholic priest was abusing little boys for years, oh, God was at work. I'm like, wait a second, really? And like, the more you think about the bad things that have happened in this world, and even just, I mean, this is kind of more of a silly thought, but even just like the animal kingdom, I got like 6 months ago, YouTube gives you suggestions. Somehow a suggestion came up of a snake eating a frog. And I don't know if I just never was exposed to like snakes that much. I guess I wasn't, but it was eating this frog alive. And like, so the snake is like, it grabs the legs and just slowly eats up the body of the snake, of the frog. And, so the frog's like literally like at the very last minute, his mouth and his eyes are like peering out as he's just, he's got 3 seconds left and he's in the mouth. And I guess they suffocate inside the snake. But you think that's the way snakes and a lot of other animals, I'm sure, eat their meals. So you're thinking, how many snakes are there on this planet? What, maybe millions of billion, or maybe even billions of times a day, animals get eaten alive. Like, that's God's plans for things to get eaten alive. And I know that's a kind of weird example, but it's just like, when you think about it, especially thinking from an evolutionary perspective, that we came from that, which I do want to ask you about your evolutionary perspectives on it too, but like, there's so many things that are weird about the suffering and the bizarreness of what goes on in life. And you think, God's got a plan for this? I don't know anymore. That doesn't sound right.
Well, you just chalk it up to living in a fallen world, and that takes care of everything.
Yeah. The creation is groaning.
Oh.
I wanted to touch on the question of evolution too here. What was your perspective on that before, and did that become part of your deconversion at all, when learning science and things like that?
It wasn't so much learning about science, like that had a big part in my deconversion. I think I always kind of like felt uncomfortable as I was still a Christian, like learning about evolution. Like, it was a taboo topic to talk about.
Clearly from the devil.
Yeah. It wasn't really avoided in college. I didn't really take many science classes. It was mostly just psychology. I did take environmental science though. But we didn't talk about it a whole lot.
Do you know if your college had a position on like theistic evolution or versus, pure creationism?
I don't know that they had a position. I know that we talked about different positions in general, just like what was out there. We talked about evolution in one of my psychology classes, like the evolution of personality. And I got the vibe from my professor that he just kind of thought it was like not true. Like, I'm going to cover this because it's a chapter in the textbook that you paid a lot of money for. But yeah, that's about it. Just be able to answer the couple questions on the test about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they took a strong stance. I think it varied professor to professor, like what they felt, but they weren't like super vocal about it, like trying to make us believe one way or the other.
My Bible college experience was very similar. I almost got this sense that they kind of felt like if they ignored it, eventually the science would catch up with creationism, realize it's right, and eventually the problem would just go away. So why deal with this problem? It's going to disappear eventually anyway. And they didn't talk about it too much, which is sad. But I see a light flashing on you. I think God is trying to get your attention. Is there a light flashing on your window? You go from like yellow to white, and I think there might be, maybe this God's trying to say something to you.
Yeah, stop talking, Sarah. I don't see anything.
Okay, no, it's fine. It might just be the sun or something.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about if you could touch on purity culture. That is, and it connected with it, certainly the shame part of that, shaming aspect. But that's a big part of at least one of your videos, and I think you touched on at least one other. What is, for anyone that isn't aware, and I'm sure those of us who grew up like you and I did, it's very much a well-known topic, but just for anyone who doesn't know what that means, what is purity culture all about?
Good old purity culture. For me, I didn't really know about it or experience it until I was in college, but basically it's just this whole like value system of like really promoting virginity and saving all sexual experiences until you're married, and doing all that with your spouse. Like, you aren't supposed to do anything sexual prior to being married. And with that being the goal, there's just a lot of different rules and things that developed from that being the goal. Like, you shouldn't be alone with someone of the opposite sex, and if you are, there are only certain things that you can do, like dating. You can just figuring out what's allowed and what's not. You could spend years trying to figure that out, which I sort of did in my one relationship. But it's just toxic. It's just toxic. That would be how I'd have to just summarize it. It's unnecessary and toxic.
Did you get exposed to, I'm going to drop two names here, either Josh McDowell or Joshua Harris?
Josh Harris, for
Josh
sure.
Harris.
Yeah.
Could you, for anyone who doesn't know who that person is, could you just tell us about that? What his, and I assume his story has changed dramatically since then, but what was his story back then with his books?
His book that everybody knew about was I Kissed Dating Goodbye. I actually didn't read that one. I was familiar with him. There was a different author that I read her books about, like purity culture and all of that. But for him, I think he kind of set the standard of like you should only court someone, which is where like you are dating somebody with the clear intention of getting married. Which just is so complicated. Like, you're supposed to know within a couple of dates whether or not someone is marriage material, and decide to court them until you eventually get engaged and all of that. The author that I read a lot of was Leslie Ludy. I don't know if you've heard of her, but oh my gosh, her books really messed me up. And it's been very comforting to find other people in deconstruction communities and like evangelical communities that are familiar with her work. But the thing that I think messed me up the most from her books was there was a part in one of them where she said, like, it's possible to only date one person. Like, so it's possible to only ever date the person that God wants you to marry. And that was so toxic for me. Like, I thought, this is great. I can avoid all of like the wasted time spent dating multiple people. Like, if I just follow this and do it right the first time, I don't have to go through any of that. I'll just, get it right and find this person and be happy and all of that.
Yeah.
Which is not the case at all. That's not how relationships work.
And not necessarily how they should work either, because
no,
you need experience to learn what kind of personalities work well with you.
Yeah.
It's funny. I did a lot of research before I deconverted, actually, just about the shame issue, and I was writing a book about. I still have the manuscript. It would have to be dramatically rewritten from this point of view, but just talking about the shame culture, and I forget what the book was, but there was a book just addressing some of these people that are very much focused on purity and promise rings and virginity pledges. And this one person said he was a chaplain at a college, and he said he would have these people come to him who had in their teenage years had pledged their virginity to someone like Josh McDowell, he was a speaker. He's more, do you know Josh McDowell?
I've heard the name.
He's done a lot more. He's more well known for apologetics, like saying why the Bible's reliable and why the resurrection happened. Well, there's so much good evidence for it, and there so isn't. But anyway, he had previously focused a lot more on the purity culture. And this chaplain would say these people would in their college years would get married, and he said they would come to him and tell him what was going on, and bare their hearts. And he said in their teenage years they had pledged their virginity to Josh McDowell, so to speak. They didn't really pledge it to Christ, but they pledged it to Josh McDowell. They said now in their young adult years they had gotten married, and they said so many of them, as a pattern, they hated sex and wanted to die. And he's like over and over and over he saw these people who had done this. And like I understand the theory behind it is like, look, especially for young ladies who may be innocent and potentially even gullible, that does happen. That dynamic is real. People can get tricked by bad men, and it was usually focused on, from my perspective, on the girls, but the guys had a big job to do. But it was like, look, girls, there are guys who just want to treat you as a piece of meat and use you, and you need to be very vigilant, very vigilant. And the good guys will want you for you, not just for your body. And the good guys will not want to use you for one night stand or a month. They'll want to be responsible, honorable. And, they'll be the kind of guys that want to go to your dad and say, hey, can I enter into a courtship? Hey, I'm getting serious. Is this okay to move forward? Mm-hmm. And that the honor part of that is respectable, and I get that's worth it. But I think that the part of it that comes is a couple aspects. Number one, girls end up feeling a lot like they are seductresses, inherently seductresses. Like if you show anything too much that's going to cause a guy's eye to do a double take, you are causing your brothers in Christ to stumble, and therefore you're the problem. So you're inherently, as girls that go through puberty, they're feeling sexual feelings, they're developing, but they're at the same point, instead of being like, what a glorious creation I am, what an awesome thing this is, it's like, oh, I got to make sure no one's looking. And the guys at the same time are being hounded, like, guys, stop thinking about it. And so you basically create this secret life for guys, especially. I'm sure it happens to girls too, but as a guy, I can confirm it. You get this secret life where, like, I'm just thinking about this stuff all the time, but in the facade, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm thinking about Jesus and about the gospel. The other sides of it are the pride issue. If you happen to be one of those people that by your personality and your circumstances, you hit all the rules right, and you're like, I did everything right, there is a pride that comes. It's overwhelming. I've seen it so many times. I did the right things, and now my marriage is awesome. And if you all would just do like what I did, you'd be fine. Like, why can't you get in line with God's plan? And then the other side is, if you happen to be one of those people that didn't follow, and you say you got pregnant before marriage or something else like that, the shame of it is overwhelming. And even if it's not like a public thing where you had a baby, just the knowledge internally that you could have given your future husband the best gift, and instead you're giving him this tainted thing. Like, you took a beautiful scarf and put it in the mud and then tried to give it to someone as a birthday present. Like, that's disgusting. And like, that's the whole idea of you've diminished yourself before God, and you've diminished what you've given to your future spouse. And those dynamics, and I'm sure there's more of it, those are ones that come to mind, they drown people. They absolutely drown people. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I've said this before, but in Bible college, Dean of Men gets all the guys together in the lunchroom at night, like 7:00 at night, just guys, and just with the Dean of Men. And I'm thinking, like, okay, it's gonna be like guys gotta get serious about the gospel, prayer life, blah blah blah. No, it's one message, guys. The masturbation has to stop. I'm like, really? You get the guys together one time and that's your only message? And that was it. That was the only time I ever saw them get us together. But it's overwhelming, and people drown in it. And then, like, you can't flip that switch of like, okay, if I do it right, I don't touch, I don't think, I don't this. Then you get to marriage and you're like, okay, I should suddenly be so delighted. You can't flip that switch. And you
No,
people like,
not
I
a
don't want to be
switch.
touched.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's awful.
What did you ever find other people sharing similar stories, like where they would talk about these things? And did you find other people struggling with anything, different than what I just described? And like how do people process it from your experience?
I don't know anyone like in person that struggled with that, but I certainly have found Facebook groups where people have shared their struggles, and it's, I mean, everything you described is totally accurate.
Hmm.
I don't know that I would add anything to it, other things that I've heard of like how it affects people, but it's absolutely true. Just the amount of legalism and guilt that is in purity culture is awful. Like it's crippling. You don't feel like you can do anything, and the normal things that you do feel are bad, and it's just awful. For me, like I like it, sexuality is not a light switch, and they teach it to you as if that's the case. Like I seriously was like an asexual person until, I got married, or well, not before. I didn't wait till I get married, till I got married. I was like, I'm not about that life anymore. Like I'm not doing this. This isn't healthy. But even like after I got married, things didn't just magically, fix themselves. It's like, oh, I know I'm in touch with my body and all of that stuff. Like, no, it was a struggle. It took a couple of years for me to feel comfortable with who I am and understand how things work. Like it was insane.
Yeah.
And just like looking back on the things that I was taught, it's it's just really sad that we're made to feel so guilty about things that are just so normal, and you don't need to feel guilty about that.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest problems that I had in my relationship in college was just physical boundaries and trying to stay pure.
Hmm.
It was exhausting trying to like stay within the boundaries we set. Like we literally drew them out on a piece of paper, like wrote out what we could do, what we couldn't. It was ridiculous trying to just constantly control what we were doing for the sake of staying pure, because that's what God wanted us to do, is stay pure. And it was it was insane,
Hmm.
just insane. That's why when I finally did deconstruct and met my now husband, like at first I'm like, maybe we should set some boundaries, but eventually I just threw it out the window. Like I can't do this again. I cannot be that strict about what we're allowed to do and what we aren't, and for what reason. Like where are we getting this from? The Bible doesn't say whether you can hold hands before you're married or if you can kiss before you're married. It just doesn't. Like who's coming up with this? Because
Yeah.
it's not in the Bible.
And it's almost like there's just a like a broad principle too of like, is this really helping you to thrive?
Yeah.
And I feel like so many of the things that they'll you can preach purity left and right. Certainly preach modesty and self-control, but at the end of the day, if you're not thriving, and especially if you have a secret life, which I mean, to me, the purity culture / modesty culture, it leads to such a secret life. I mean, guys have secret lives. I mean, I remember being in the dorms at Bible college, and I know from conversations, they were not who these are guys like in their 20s, young 20s, who are studying to be pastors of churches, not assistant pastors, but main pastors of churches, 2021, and absolutely drowning in shame, drowning in it. And like, how is this healthy? I mean, even if they find some wonderful woman and start having to get married and have lots of intimacy, does that really fix this problem? Like, yeah, some guys are going to find a great girl and they're going to have a great marriage, and good for them. But there's a lot of guys that where it isn't going to happen. They're not going to get married for another 5 or 10 years. And, there are other people that are just going to have, they're going to get married, but the shame is going to overwhelm them and even kill the marriage. And it's like, there's a better way here. And I feel like one of the biggest questions that I've come across in my mind is just being willing to say, something about this doesn't sound right. And that doesn't always mean that it's not right. Sometimes you can say that doesn't sound right, but you learn more information, you find, it's okay. But just to be able to say that to yourself and say, I'm going to actually go down this road as far as I need to. Something about this doesn't sound right, or this isn't working. I'm not thriving. To give yourself the freedom to admit that and to do what you need to do to resolve that issue is so critical. And especially in this, I'm curious on the purity culture. Did you get sucked into that modesty culture where the long dresses? I know a lot of people that I've come across in my, especially Bob Jones-ish world. It's very much, the blouses would be way up here and the skirts would be way down to your ankles. Was that something you got sucked into, or was that not as big a deal for your Christian culture?
We definitely were encouraged to be modest, but not to the extreme of like wearing super high collared like shirts or skirts or anything like that. But couldn't wear a bikini. It had to be, a swimsuit that covered up your midriff. You couldn't wear anything low cut. No like super short shorts, just like that sort of stuff, because I think you touched on it earlier, just like needing to protect our brothers in Christ because they are more likely to stumble because they're more visual and all of that. And I took that to heart. Like, it definitely impacted what I chose to wear, and I did think about it. I mean, even my boyfriend in college would tell me sometimes, like, your shirt's kind of tight and it's kind of distracting me. I mean, this is a t-shirt. I am not the kind of person that likes to, like, show off anything, but even just like hearing that from my boyfriend like made me even more like self-conscious. Like, I never wore that shirt again. Like, that's going in the donation pile.
Hmm.
um
Does it? I mean, this is. I don't want to turn this whole conversation into this topic, but just since we're on it, does it ever feel to you like that some of those dynamics that are very prevalent in the Christian community, that it leads women to just feel like there's an inherent dirtiness about them? I mean, like this constant sense of you got to cover up. I mean, I know it was always like a kind of like a chuckle kind of joke, but like when you'd occasionally, as either a guy or even a group of guys and girls, when you'd see some girl that came in and she's wearing a thin shirt and it just happens to be really cold that day and she didn't notice, she's got really hard nipples poking through, and it's almost like, how dare she not notice herself? How dare she not be aware of it? And as soon as she notices, she needs to be, number one, kind of embarrassed, and certainly number two, go fix it, go cover up more.
yeah.
And this whole idea of like, you never get to just think, I'm just awesome the way I am. I'm just awesome, and for a guy, to think, I believe, I don't know what the number is, guys make, 50,000 sperm an hour or something, or it's probably more than that. But, just to think, I am supposed to think about these things. I'm supposed to be driven. And it's like, it sets up this whole culture where you never get to just think, I'm awesome the way I am. And kind of maybe a related question before you answer it is circumcision. I know it's not talking about sex, it's about babies, but just the idea of like, oh, this is this beautiful creation of God. So as soon as it's born, let's do the work of the Lord and, mutilate his genitals. Just this idea of like, however you were made, God wants to, especially for the boys, he wants to adjust you quickly. And as you grow up and mature into an adult, you need to be really kind of like ashamed a little bit. Did you ever feel like that was part of your experience with Christianity?
I'd say a little bit, just with being a female and being told like, you need to cover up, and it's our responsibility to make sure we're doing everything we can to make things easier for the guys. It's like, why is this just our responsibility?
Yeah.
It, and if you do have somebody that's like looking at you in a way that I guess would be lustful, like, what is wrong with that? I mean, as long as you're not, violating this person or like acting on it or something, like, it's normal. And that's again, just why are all of these normal things turned into something that's, sinful and wrong? And evil and outside of a certain context. Like what
Yeah.
changes
It's like
because
they're
of
somehow
marriage?
seen as like inappropriate thoughts to be thinking like you're attracted to somebody. Like that's not it's not inappropriate, but it in that worldview it becomes usually very inappropriate to think about, being attracted to somebody and admiring their beauty. And it's like, what a twisted, I mean, from my perspective, what a twisted way to see the human being and to see our desires for, for contact, for relationship, for, intimacy, and even for eroticism. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's normal. It's
Mm-hmm.
not weird. It's not creepy. It's not inappropriate. It's good. And it's very sad how that's, I think, destroyed people, and other people. It's just like this lifelong struggle. Like, I know for guys, it's like, oops, I messed up again. Oh, I'm back on, track with God this week. Oh, I messed up again. No, I'm back on track with God. And it's like, it's like a dual personality thing that Kurt's created. And I know it's very biblical in that sense. The Romans, I guess it's what, 5, 6, 7, and 8. But I'm in the flesh, but I'm in the spirit. I'm in the flesh, I'm in the spirit. And it's like, do you really want to live with this world where you're just like, I love myself, I hate myself, I love how God created me, I don't like it, and you end up basically in a love-hate relationship, a Jekyll-Hyde relationship with your own self.
Yeah. And I just hearing you say, like, I love myself, I hate myself, I messed up, I need to fix it. Like, that takes me back to college, like with my boyfriend. He would just beat himself up so much.
Hmm.
He did have issues, but he looked at porn on occasion and would feel so guilty about it. Like it was just this thing that he couldn't get under control. And at the time, like to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's looking at porn. I can't marry him. Because I literally had a mentor basically telling me that if he's looking at porn, you can't marry him.
Hmm.
And it was just really complicated. But I would feel bad just how much he would beat himself up over what I now know are normal things.
Yeah.
Like it didn't have to be this deal breaker issue. And oh, it's painful to look back on.
Yeah, and it's such a distraction. Like, it's a big issue, but it's also such a distraction that doesn't need to be there. It's like a nonsense issue almost, because you're like, this is normal. There's other really important issues in life to focus on, to put our anxieties and our angst into, our thoughts. This doesn't need to be one of them, and yet I think it also affects people's ability to who do get married, and hopefully to some level really enjoy being married and enjoy the intimacy, but just to be able to really explore that, whatever that means for each couple, just to explore that in every way, and also to be able to not be ashamed, whether it's talking about diving into the intimacy with your spouse, or even just self-pleasuring. Like, that's not inappropriate. It's not inappropriate, and it's so hard for people to get past these blocks. But I know we've talked a lot about the purity culture thing and sexuality, but I did want to bring it back to your story too. So you've brought all these concerns, these issues up. Take us over the edge. What happens? It feels like it's like a tidal waves kind of building, a tsunami's kind of building in the background. We're kind of seeing it on the horizon. What happens next with your story after all this is kind of being weighed in your mind?
So I think the next thing that kind of like helped push things over the edge, honestly, was meeting my husband. Um, since we've talked about purity culture a lot, um, when I met him on Christian Mingle, so I expected him to be a certain way when it came to faith, and I figured we'd be pretty similar in, our level of intensity with what we believed and following Jesus and all of that, which didn't turn out to be the case.
Hmm.
Which in hindsight was a really good thing since I'm now this heathen person. But when I met him though, I did just like I wanted to revert back to all of the purity culture rules and things, and was asking like, what can we do? What can't we do physically? Are we moving too fast? And for him, it wasn't a concern. Like he had already had sex with somebody. Like it's not that he was careless about it. It wasn't a big deal. He didn't come from that sort of conservative background like I did.
Hmm.
And so he was, ready and eager to do things. And I just was like, oh my gosh, but we've only been dating like a short amount of time. Is this okay? So it really was just like, am I going to do things the same way that I did before and I was miserable, or am I going to consider that there is a different way of doing things that is healthier and better and try to not feel bad for it, which
Mm.
I opted for that route. And I know to a lot of my friends from college, it probably looked like me meeting my husband is what got the ball rolling with me, deconstructing and questioning everything. But I really think it was just sort of the catalyst to everything, kind of coming to light. I'm questioning all this stuff. I
Mm.
can't live this way. Like now it's actually not just in my mind, but it's showing up in my actions too. Like it's changing how I live. And that started a whole season of just um, feeling shame and feeling like I couldn't be honest with my friends that, were the people I was closest to in my life. I was questioning everything that I thought our friendships were built on from college and questioning all of the things that we learned in college. Most of us had the same mentor that kind of, instilled these certain values in us and all of that. And I'm just questioning it all. So I just felt very alone and just afraid of what they would think if they found out what I was asking and the decisions I was making in my relationship with my husband and all of that.
Mm.
And it was a lot to be questioning all of that and feeling all of those things while also trying to figure out what I did believe or what I didn't believe and all that.
Did you have anyone you could talk to about, some of these issues? Is there kind of, it sounds like they're kind of coming to a, either this is real, God's real, or he's not, coming to that kind of final decision point of what you believed, what you thought about reality. Did you have anyone who could walk you through any of that, or was it just you pretty much alone?
I did to a point. There was someone, he was a counselor at my church that I had connected with, and I had just shared that I feel like the version of Christianity that I knew isn't isn't like isn't accurate, I guess. I wasn't ready to throw it all out the window at that point. I still considered myself to be a Christian, but just not the same kind. And so for a while, I would meet with him, and I went to a small group that he had started for other people that just kind of wanted to explore maybe there's a different version of Christianity or like what it means to be Christian than what we've known so far. And so
Mm.
for a while I went to that group and met with them, and it was affirming to be around other people that were asking similar questions but hadn't like walked away from it entirely. But again, I was like physically involved with my boyfriend at that time, and I felt like it was a secret I'm hiding because we got engaged at one point and everyone's like excited for us. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like they probably think that I'm waiting until we get married to, have sex with him and all this stuff. And, he's staying over at my house every weekend and nobody knows this stuff. And anyway, it got to a point where I didn't feel like I'd outgrown the group.
Mm.
I I was asking questions that were beyond what they were asking and focusing on. And so I eventually just stopped going. And I think it was at that point where I just felt like I didn't have anybody. And I had felt that too for a while with the group as it was, going on. I was still attending, but feeling like I didn't fit anymore. I just kind of stopped sharing as much. Um, but eventually, I think I had been looking up books on like Christianity and psychology online, and I had found a book by Steve Austin. I think it was from pastor to a psych ward, and it was about his experience being a pastor and struggling with mental illness and ultimately attempting to take his life. And it was just like his journey of how he could be a Christian and even be in a leadership position at a church and still be struggling and still want to die. And so I found that book and ended up connecting with him. And he does life coaching. So he eventually became my life coach. And so I finally had somebody that understood what I was going through, didn't judge me for the things I was asking, and walked with me through that process that felt impossible on my own. Because I will try to figure things out on my own if I can. And I worked really darn hard at trying to figure out like how to work through all of that. And it just wasn't happening. So to connect with someone that had gone through something similar and could help me through that process and give me permission was the biggest thing. It's like, it's okay to ask this stuff and it's okay to question. Like that made all the difference for me. And he was able to point me towards other communities online, people who were similar. And I was a huge deal for me just to know that I wasn't alone, because you don't know that when you start questioning and you aren't connected to anybody else going through it, you feel like you're the only one experiencing that, which isn't true at all. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of other people. It's just a matter of finding them. It's not like you can just casually ask people in your family or your friends, hey, are any of you questioning everything you believe? Like, it's not going to go over well generally. So to get connected to Steve first and then those other groups online made a huge difference, and just feeling like I was allowed to keep going and it was okay to end up wherever I did end up.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I was the lone. I don't know if I could have probably found some people, but I went through it more alone, and it is so good if you can have people to talk through these things, especially because I think that you were kind of, you didn't say it, but implying that like there's a sheltering that goes on. Like if all your circle is just Christian, especially if it's on fire Christian, like Christ is real. This isn't cultural. This is real. It's very hard if that's everybody, especially if it's your family and your loved ones. It's hard to do it alone. And I think a lot of people probably do struggle and just they probably go through the whole thing in their minds, not voicing their concerns. And I think too a lot of people I'm in a lot of groups, and I think people get fed up with the pat answers. I think you may have said this in one of your videos, but just the idea of like being able to say, I want genuine answers. I'm not satisfied with the pat answer. I'm not satisfied with the surface. I really want to know. I want a genuine answer to these questions, and to be able to do that and say, you know what, these apologists that say this stuff and they say, oh, this Bible, this book is so reliable. It's like it's so inerrant. It's so this, it's that. It's like it doesn't seem like it anymore. And yet everyone's just like parroting them. Yes, it's like you can just imagine like people all being trained to shake their head at the right time. Like, yes, sir, I agree. It's legitimate. It's inerrant. It's the word of God. And it's like everyone's just shaking their head. And it's like you're sitting there saying, I'm not quite ready to go like this, but I'm at least stopping. Like I'm not going to nod my head anymore. And it's like it feels scary because everyone else is still nodding, but like it's like you're judged. You feel like you're either going to be judged if you're vocal to say, you know what, these answers aren't good enough anymore. These answers don't sound right anymore. And I feel so proud of, like, I mean, I don't mean to say this like I'm proud of myself, although I guess you could say I'm proud of it, but I'm proud of people that I hear their stories as they go through it and say, I gave myself the freedom to explore these questions to wherever they took. And like, I remember, as a Christian saying, years ago to God, praying, God, do whatever it takes to make me holy. It doesn't matter whatever you have to do, deprive me of anything, hurt me, though you slay me, yet I will trust you. Do anything to make me a holy person, a vessel that you can use for yourself, for the gospel, for eternity. And just in a similar vein, to say it as a skeptic, not even as an atheist, just as a skeptic, to say, I want the truth more than anything else. If that leads me to Christ, great. If it doesn't lead me to Christ in the Bible, I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
That's it's not even a scary thought. Some people, it's just like weird. Like, how can you pursue the truth and not get to Christ? But just to be able to say, if in theory, even if I pursue the truth and it doesn't lead me to Christ, I'm okay with the truth wherever it leads me. And just even in theory to say, if it does lead me theoretically away from Christ, I will go away from Christ. And that freedom is so hard. That barrier to breach it is so difficult. I commend you for doing it, and I commend anyone who's listening who's doing it, or even thinking about doing it. It's hard work. It's worth it. It does get better. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, but
Yeah.
it's you're not alone. Like you said, there's people going through it every day, and it's real. And there are better answers than these pat answers that aren't genuine that you're getting from the apologists.
Hmm.
So
It takes an insane amount of courage to question everything that you've built your life on. Like, it's by far the hardest thing I've ever done. And I have questioned multiple times, is this worth it? Would it have just been easier to pretend that everything was fine and to keep going to church and keep trying to tell myself the things that I would always tell myself to reassure myself that, God's just doing things his way and I don't understand and all of that. But at the end of the day, I truly believe living an authentic life is the most rewarding and important thing you can do for yourself, because to just feel like you're living a lie and not being true to who you are and what questions you're asking, it's awful. Like, at a point it was like, what's worse, pretending or continuing to ask these really hard questions? Like, it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe pretending is better, but at least for me, there was no way I
mm,
could I could keep living a lie and tell myself that everything was fine. Like,
mm.
it's worth doing the hard work of asking and reevaluating. And it does get better, as you said. It just takes time.
So take us over the edge. What was the actual deconversion experience? What were the final thoughts or triggers that took you out of it, and what was it like to go through that process? And what were the first few steps on the other side like?
I think um, finding those groups online and just seeing the sheer amount of other people that were going through the same thing as me um, was kind of like the last thing I needed to validate what I had experienced. It helped me start to see things as an outsider rather than someone who is still in all of the same like religious beliefs and still inside all of that. I started to see it for the first time really as someone who wasn't part of it anymore, and it became a lot easier to see everything that was just messed up about it, everything that was unhealthy about it. I could look back at my own story and see just the toxic parts, ways that my faith had been used to kind of manipulate me, not in any like crazy ways, but just in regular decisions, like the relationship from college, like I mentioned, like being told that it was my fault for struggling because I just wasn't believing in God enough. Like, that's wrong. That is not okay. And it's taken me a long time to get to that point to say, you know what? I went through that and that's not okay. And there's a lot that wasn't okay with what I was told and what I was taught. And it shouldn't be okay.
Hmm.
So again, just hearing other stories from people and being able to like validate what they went through and relate to what they went through, but also like having people validate my story too, as I've shared some of it in those groups. um, I don't think I had like a moment in time where I decided I'm not going to be a Christian anymore. I think it's something that slowly happened over time. I don't think I was ready to admit that I didn't think I was a Christian anymore right away.
Hmm.
But in time, I think I just kind of was thinking about it, and it's like, I don't think I can call myself a Christian anymore. Like, all of the standards I had of what makes someone a Christian, I really don't. I don't check those boxes anymore. I don't know if God is real. I don't know if Jesus is really there. Like, I don't believe I'm a sinful person anymore that needs saving. I don't believe like all of these things. And
Mm.
so I just kind of like quietly set that label aside and just kind of like had to feel out what it was like. And I never in my life would have expected to ever not call myself a Christian. Like it's still crazy to me to think back on who I was and how much my relationship with Jesus meant to me, and and realize like, how did I walk away from that? How could that have ever happened to me? Like, of all people, this should never have happened to me. Like, there's no way, but it did. It happened, and um,
Mm.
I don't know that I've arrived at any great conclusions. I haven't like dug into a lot of like the science or research or any of that with the Bible or Christianity, the history of it, or any of that. And maybe I will at some point. I haven't needed that
Mm.
yet to do any of that at this point. But it's mostly just been being true to myself as all of this stuff has happened, as all of these stages have, as I've progressed through them, and it's led to where I am now.
Mm. It's amazing to me to hear just so all of our stories are so unique, and your story has a lot of similarities to mine, but like the end of it is very different. Where you said yours was gradual, mine was very much like right up to the end. I was a Christian. It hit me in an hour. I
Mm,
just all the pieces came, and it was like someone opened up the floodgates, and it was like, shoot, this isn't real. Shoot, there's no God. Shoot, there's no afterlife. Shoot, there's no sin. Shoot, evolution might be real. Just like
well,
blast on blast all in an hour. And but it's interesting too. You said you didn't really dive into the origins of the Bible stuff. Did you? Were you at least aware of some of the issues, like even I don't know, just general discrepancies? Like this gospel says this happened here, and he cleansed the temple once, and this gospel says he cleansed it twice. Like, did you get in any discrepancies, or was there any part of that was a part of it, or was it more just like the philosophy of like this is so unhealthy to live this way?
primarily, I think it was the cognitive dissonance that led me to eventually deconstruct, but there definitely were questions that I had. I mean, it's all things you try to push aside when you are still a believer. I always was like bothered by the fact that all of the Easter accounts, like all of the stories of Jesus' resurrection in the Bible, didn't match. Like there are people here, but there aren't in this one. Like this doesn't match. So just little things like that I had noticed in my own like reading of the Bible and stuff. Um, but I didn't need to like, I guess, pursue that to be able to get to where I am.
Yeah.
Something that I have done a lot of since I started questioning is watching like atheist videos on YouTube, like Jimmy Snow, Mr. Atheist on YouTube. I watch a lot of his videos, and it's not even that I like was considering being atheist. It's just I finally felt like I had the ability to listen to these questions and not feel like my life was at stake. It's like I'm okay even if all of the stuff I believed isn't accurate. So I'm going to watch videos and expose myself to all this stuff that I felt afraid to before.
Mm.
And so it's been awesome just to hear all these different perspectives. Like I've heard about all of these different things and questions people have about the Bible and the history and the accuracy. So I'm familiar with a lot of it. I just haven't researched it myself. And maybe at some point I will, but just to be able to like listen to people that I never would have before because it was like some sort of protective thing. Like it's so liberating to just be able to listen to someone that has a totally different view and not feel threatened in any
Yeah.
way.
Like you have to convert them to your point of view if you can.
Right. Yeah, or like I need to comment something and try to point them to Jesus, but it's not gonna go over well or something like that.
I've got to say, I admire that your method of deconversion, the cognitive dissonance being the issue. My path was much more the study of the origins of the Bible and Christianity. But I've said on several interviews to people, the stuff that I've found, and I keep finding more stuff that gives me reason to think this is entirely man-made, and very, very much a book that's an amalgamation of different religious ideas from different religions. Certainly, and for people that are creationists, to tell them, hey, your religion has evolved, millions of times, and just that it's very much, a creation of a history of people fighting of different versions of Christianity, fighting early on, and then other church councils deciding which ones they wanted to have the victor be, and then other church councils clarifying it. And your whole spirituality is based on all these church councils and translations of edits, of interpolations, of redactions, of groups that were originally fighting about their version of Christianity, who came from other groups that were borrowing from Zoroastrianism and from Greco-Roman mythology. I mean, heavily borrowing from Greco-Roman mythology, and going back all the way back to Yahweh. Having a wife named Asherah, being the son of El, and just the whole history. And if anyone does want a really easy summary of some of that stuff, I recommend a video. The guy's name is Bill Zersher, and the YouTube video is called "Seeing Through Christianity." Highly recommend it. I'm actually hopefully going to be interviewing him shortly. But "Seeing Through Christianity" by Bill Zersher, fantastic. It's maybe 90 minutes. It'll take you not too deep, but it'll take you through this whole thing of where Yahweh comes from, how the Christianity evolved. But the idea I meant to get to is that stuff is fascinating, and it's a great reason to deconvert, because it does look like it's entirely man-made. But I don't think you should need that stuff. I did, and I'm glad I got to it, because I guess it was what I personally needed. But I think people should be able to look at the book and just say, regardless of anything about that I know or don't know about how it got here, the fact that it says, go into the land and kill everybody, take slaves, keep the virgin girls for yourself, kill everything, including animals, kill the animals, all of them, stone people that pick up sticks on the Sabbath, stone your kids that are, extremely rebellious, be misogynistic. Girls are worth very little. They're not worth much. You can sell your daughter as a slave. If you find a girl that's, she's not engaged yet, if you rape her, all you have to do is pay the dad 30 shekels of silver, and she becomes your wife, and she can never leave you, even though it started with a rape. And it goes on and on and on the list of things. I think people should be able to look at that and say, wow, that's really bad. That's bad stuff. And to be able to say, let's go down to the core of it, the gospel. This is not as beautiful as I thought. This is blood magic, straight copy from Egyptian stuff. This is blood magic and scapegoating. This is a copy of other religions. And even if it hadn't been, if they came up with it themselves, why do I want blood magic and scapegoating as my worldview? Like, what makes that right? And just even the basic philosophical things, like God says, the soul that sins, it must die. Well, why? Why can't the soul that sins just be forgiven? And why does God have to have the blood of a spotless lamb to be the atonement? Why can't God just say, I just forgive you? I make the rules. I'm the king. I just forgive you. And, endless things like that. Like, that should be enough without any knowledge of church history or, early, Near East history, Greco-Roman mystery cult history. It's all fascinating, and I study it nonstop down. It's very helpful. People didn't tell me, hey, there's the Book of Enoch is quoted dozens and dozens and dozens of times in the New Testament. That's helpful to me, but it shouldn't be necessary. You should be able to say, this is just a bizarre book. And take some good points from it if you want to. If you want to look at the Sermon on the Mount and take a few highlights away, fine. But if you're going to take this book as literally history and literally God's message to us, it is not a love letter. It's a psychopathic deity who he loves you so much that if you don't love him back, he'll burn you in hell forever. And it's like, come on, people, we are better than this. We are better than this. And I appreciate that your journey did not require, church history kind of stuff. It's fascinating, but it shouldn't be. We should be able to just look at the cognitive dissonance that you're pointing out and say, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Let's step back from the edge and the insanity. Let's think this through step by step, and let's get healthy. Let's start thriving. And when you take literal Christianity for the way it's presented to us, it does not lead to thriving. In my personal journey, I had more peace in the first week after deconversion than in 43 years as a Christian. So, did you
Lot.
did you have any sense of the differential of peace before and after your deconversion?
Something I wrote about on my blog is just feeling like free of the guilt, just the guilt of not measuring up. Like, I feel like the Christianity I knew maybe didn't intend to load people down with guilt. Like, again, my burden is easy and all of that, and my yoke is light. That's not true. Like, it's just not true.
Mm,
And people can accuse me of doing it wrong, but there's just perpetual guilt of I'm not doing enough. I'm not praying enough for other people. I'm not being genuine enough in my intentions of wanting to be with other people and like reach out to them, or trying to share the gospel with them. I'm not doing enough, and I do not miss that. So in that sense, I feel like this huge weight has been lifted off of me to where I don't feel like I'm this person that isn't measuring up to this big standard. Because if you are a real follower of Jesus, you should be doing a lot of different things. It should be natural to want to share the good news with other people, and you should want to pray for hours, and you should just have all of these great fruits of the spirit all the time. And it's not the case. Like, so I don't miss the guilt at
mm,
all. I can just live my life. I can see people for who they are and not souls that need to be saved. There's no hidden agenda. I just get to be a normal human being. And that's actually something I've loved about writing music. And my piano CD that I just came out with is it's all based on like things I've experienced as I've deconstructed and just like putting it into music form
mm,
and just being able to feel like I'm allowed to feel. Like, I have a song about depression and just turned it into music, like what that felt like, and not feeling bad, like, oh, you're a Christian, you should be happy, you shouldn't feel depressed, like just pray about it and all of that. So just like feeling all these different things. It's just so healthy. Just being human has been amazing.
mm.
It shouldn't be revolutionary to just let yourself be human, but for people like us, where you come from this very rigid system and are told what's okay and what's not, like, just letting yourself be a normal human being is a huge deal.
It is. And it's like learning to see for the first time or to think for the first time. It's like the blinders come off and you're like, I have never actually looked at the universe for real. Like, I've never seen it. It's always been, look up at the stars, look at the beauty of a sunset, thank God, thank Yahweh, the God who commands genocide and does blood magic and is burning people in hell actively as we speak. Bless Yahweh. And it's like to take that away and start afresh and say, I just want to look at a sunset and stop there. Just say, oh, it's beautiful. And not but God, but just
Mm-hmm.
nothing, just sunset. And
Yeah.
it's so cool to see the world freshly and to realize that even some of the issues, we don't have time to deal with them, but issues such as gender issues, issues of abortion, issues of politics, of economics, all that. It's like there's so many issues that you realize I have to rethink this now through a non-theistic lens, through a non-Christian lens, and it's kind of scary, to be honest. And some subjects are scary to me, and some subjects I'm avoiding right now because I'm not sure where I stand with all of them. But it's like, okay, I need to go. These are now the hard work is going to begin again for some of these issues. What does it mean to think through it as a human who, admittedly, does not have some kind of moral standard that's outside of the universe? That's their morality is something we create as a community. There's all kinds of implications of it, and to do that work, but to think I'm now free to do it without the deception. I'd rather do this without the deception and maybe be wrong and have to rethink it than to be satisfied with these pat answers, but be entirely in a make-believe, fake-believe world. And I love too that you're talking about like just being the dissonance of the guilt of like you're never enough. I've always thought, like, there's the implication, it doesn't get said too much, at least in my experience, but this implication of, if things aren't going so well for you in your Christian life, it's not God's fault. It can't be. So if you don't have the fruit of the Spirit, if your thoughts aren't under control, you're not thinking lustfully or angrily or whatever, if I should say, if you are doing that stuff, if you aren't preaching the gospel, if you'd rather watch a show on Netflix than go preach the gospel to somebody or pray, if you're unwilling to fast, whatever it is, if you're not feeling this joy of the Lord, I mean, they allow this technicality of maybe it's a like a mind chemical issue, or maybe you need medicine. But apart from that one exception, if you're not in a clinical depression where you need a pill, and I know some Christians don't even allow that, but if you, whether you allow it or not, the rest of it, it's not about your brain chemicals being off. It's just you and God. If it's not thriving, it cannot be God's fault. It can't be, because God's perfect. So if you're not feeling the joy of the Lord and you're not evangelizing, you're not focused on Him, if you're in any way being worldly, it's your fault. It has to be. And therefore, even though this is all about God's grace and is his what He did for us, not what we do for Him, but once the transaction of salvation is done and Christ's righteousness is imputed to you, now it is Christ living in you. The mystery of life in Christ is in us. The Holy Spirit is working through us. Therefore, if you're not seeing the fruit of the Spirit, Christ isn't evident, you're not an empty vessel where He can shine through, it's your fault. So shame on you. And it's like, the shame does not end at the cross. Everyone's like, I take all my burden, my shame, my sin, and I lay it down at the cross. It doesn't stop there. The cross doesn't fix it. It's like an interesting story. It doesn't fix the shame. And especially when you add in the idea that God can see your thoughts. Did you listen? Was Hitchens part of your deconversion at all?
Mm-hmm.
You know who I'm talking about? Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
He talks about, like, it's a celestial North Korea. They look at everything. They can see everything. They've got the hidden cameras, and instead of just God seeing everything, He can actually see inside your thoughts. So even if you're on the outside, obedient and doing the good Christian life, He sees your thoughts, what you're really like, and it's like you never get to escape. It's always you're the problem. But
yeah,
I just we've talked about a lot of issues. I just want to again direct people to your videos. You dive into some of these subjects, it's a little slower pace, where you kind of weave into some other topics. We kind of hit them quickly, even though it's been 2 hours. We hit a lot of stuff quickly. So please go, for those of you who are watching, please go watch Sarah's videos. I'll have the link below. And if I could, I'd like to get from you the link for your CD. See if people can get access to that and purchase that. But please listen to what Sarah's saying. Some of the stuff she's saying, she can say it a lot better and more succinctly than I can. She does a great job. And honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing. I know you've only got 10 or 15 videos out there. I'd love to hear what's coming next, because it feels like you've probably got a lot more you could say about these topics. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I've got some ideas for videos I wanted to cover, so that will be coming, hopefully.
That's awesome. Well, I'm a subscriber. Please, everyone, subscribe to Sarah's videos and to our channel. Sarah, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it so much. I know these are hard topics, and I know it's sometimes even it feels like a trigger to bring them back up and rehash old wounds, but I appreciate being able to do it to help other people. It's hard work, but it makes a big difference to me and hopefully to our viewers. So thank you for your heart and all this and for your videos.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's do it again.
Yeah.